search, voice, home, and strategic promotions, as well as user and content understanding. Previously, he was the director of machine learning at Netflix, where he launched improvements to many of its personalization algorithms. So this guy is quite the expert when it comes to personalized services. His title of his presentation is AI-Powered Personalization at Scale, Lessons from Spotify. Please welcome Tony Jebara. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I grew up in Montreal, so it's great to be back home in my hometown. So let me talk a little bit about Spotify and how we are using AI. And really, the AI journey started a long time ago at Spotify. I'm VP of AI. I joined in 2019. But actually, Spotify's been working on AI and machine learning to power a lot of the content discovery since 2011. And back then, it was mostly machine learning, collaborative filtering. But it's continued, and it's accelerated, of course, with the past couple of years as AI has really exploded and accelerated a lot of the types of things that actually started in 2011 at Spotify. And the scale has also grown massively. And so now we're talking about using these technologies like machine learning and AI to handle really large numbers of users and large numbers of content creators and their content items. And so looking at the monthly active users of Spotify, it's over 675 million monthly users. That's giving you an idea of the scale. Over 100 million tracks, billions of playlists that reassemble those tracks into kind of a meaningful playlist. You've got 350,000 plus audiobooks. 6.5 million podcast shows with maybe even over 100 million podcast episodes as well. And then about 250,000 video podcast shows, and then 180 countries, and 280 or so, 70 million subscribers. So really massive scale, but the key is you've got a massive scale of users and consumers and a massive scale on this side of creators and content. And so the goal of AI at Spotify is to connect these. Who should listen to this and who should discover that? And of course, consumers want to discover. They want to find new things to listen to, new books, new podcasts, new music. And creators want to be discovered. And so connecting these two massive problems is really the job. And so it's a billion things here and a billion things here. And so a billion times a billion is a big connect the dots problem, which is really how we're leveraging AI. And it's even more than a billion times a billion, because it's not just almost a billion people and a billion items they could listen to, but also each person might have different moods they're in. They may feel like they want to get entertained, they want to be focused, they want to be thrilled, they want to discover something new, they want to get motivated, they want to sleep and relax. And for every one of those moods, as well as every person, there is the perfect thing for them in that moment. And so that is really what personalization is about, really finding the right thing for each person in that moment, and as a distribution platform, making sure that the creators also are getting discovered, and it's not just everybody listening to the same thing. And so it turns out, for this task, the key thing is to use ML and AI to connect these dots to make sure you're always discovering great content. And machine learning is actually throughout the app. So when you open up Spotify, every piece of that app is actually personalized and using AI and machine learning. So your homepage is different from anyone else's homepage because we've got an AI system to figure out what to show on each part of every pixel of that homepage. Your search is personalized and uses AI because when you search for something, you're going to get a different set of results to someone else because we're going to make sure that we rank the things that are more relevant to you and your listening history up higher. When you look at a daily mix or another playlist, it's actually going to have different sets of tracks if it's a daily mix for you or it's a personalized playlist for you, and the order of those tracks is going to be rearranged with AI so that you're more likely to listen to it than somebody else who clicked on the same type of jazzy daily mix to relax on a Sunday afternoon. So those two items are actually different because the AI systems are modifying what goes into them for you. And so what we're trying to do with all of this is to make discovery seamless and intuitive. So you're just discovering content magically. Oh, I like this. This sounds good. And we're mostly doing all this AI work not to just do AI. We want to increase human consumption of human creation. And a lot of creators in the world want more consumption of their content and more discovery of their content. And this is happening across many verticals. So it's happening across music, which many of you are familiar with, through things like albums and playlists being recommended, but it's also happening with podcasts, audiobooks, and other types of merchandising. So here's a concert you'd be interested in seeing. Here's some merch. Here's a T-shirt with Adele concert details on it. You might want to buy that as well. So there's a lot of things to offer that are being generated by these creators that consumers would be interested in discovering. We've been working across all of these using AI to better understand the content and understand the users and make that match. And so that includes AI to understand what's happening in this song. Is it a heavy beat? Is it energetic? What's happening in this podcast? Are they talking about something humorously? What's the topic? Is it philosophy? Is it politics? Is this book a romance or thriller? And what is the tone of the writing in this audiobook? All of that is being processed by AI. And we roughly like to think of AI scaling this discovery problem between 1 billion people and 1 billion possible creation items, and making discovery more fluid between those two. And we use AI in 3 different flavors. There's AI for core recommendations, so that's helping us figure out who would be interested in this piece of content, so helping you discover by understanding the content and understanding the user, and basically connecting them, ranking them, finding candidates, cold starting the content when no one knows anything about it. It's a new piece of content. What's it about? We figure that out, and that helps us figure out who would be interested in trying it out. That's core recommendation, and we use lots of AI there. Then there's content enrichment. How do I make this content more accessible and modify it a little bit? So through things like translation with AI, explaining the content or re-explaining the content. Why is this relevant for you? We also provide an AI explanation. Hey, try this because you liked these types of science fiction audiobooks, and this is a podcast that talks about all sorts of science fiction and how they're all interrelated. And so then it's an explanation or a summary, or we chapterize a long podcast and say, here's little chunks in case you want to dive in deep on one specific piece of the podcast and you don't have 2 full hours. That's content enrichment. Then there's AI experiences, and I'll talk a lot more about that, where we're actually building AI experiences, things like agents and DJs and so on, that really change how we discover and use Spotify to find content. And those agents are explaining and narrating and curating the content for you, and that's really another way of experiencing media. And a lot of this is resting on the back of some amazing technologies like large language models, which initially really started off as a way of going from input words to output words. That's all it is. You talk to it and it spits out words, and that's a technology that we've been starting to leverage actually for a few years now. One of the first things is to just put words from the podcast show and say, well, what's this podcast about? And it'll give you a summary or a topic explanation. So that's words to words, and we get summaries and we get an understanding of the content. However, more and more, now we're actually using these LLMs to explain the content to the user. Here's what this song is about. Here's what the lyrics are talking about. Here's what this podcast is about. Here's what this audiobook about. And then that's really valuable for recommending, because a lot of times people see a recommendation on the page. Why is this there? Why should I care about this recommendation? Well, the LLM can tell you why you should care, because it knows the content and it knows what you've listened to and says, here's an explanation. So that's actually been a huge value add for us. And the first way we've exposed some of this is through the AI DJ, which launched in 2023, early in the year. So AI DJ is a personalized AI guide that talks you through your music. And so when you hit play with DJ, it's like having a real DJ in your pocket. What you're basically doing is you're getting our AI system to recommend a bunch of tracks to you, and then we write a commentary for those tracks that tells you why this track is being played. Here's one of your old favorites from last summer that you loved to drive to when you were in the car, and By the way, here's another really interesting new song about driving through the United States in the summertime. And then you have that explanation connecting to something that you actually care about. So we use LLMs to look at your listening history and to look at the actual content and to look at what our editors said about the content and find that way of explaining it. And so then DJ will tell you before the song starts, here's why you should listen to this and enjoy, and this is the context. And all of a sudden, users are much less likely to skip and much more likely to discover something new they haven't heard of. Because if you've heard of it, then maybe you can listen to the song again, you know what to expect. But if you've never heard of it, it's really important to say, why is this coming up and why is this playing? And so DJ listeners listen a lot more than non-DJ listeners, and they're much less likely to skip. And so how is this doing? Well, it's been great. It's been adopted all over English markets. And last summer, we continued in 2024 by launching in Spanish markets. And now we have, in addition to X, our English DJ, we have Livy, our Spanish DJ. And that's available in 69 markets. What's also fascinating there is we've introduced cultural nuances as well into how we use the LLMs to generate the explanations. So now, Livy doesn't just talk about what's happening from an American perspective, but from a Spanish cultural perspective. It's anchored in what our editors say is happening with content, what's happening culturally, as well as what you've listened to and what this specific track is about. And so now we've folded that in as well. We have both the music recommendations and what the commentary is, kind of optimized for both a Spanish and an English culture. And how is this all working? Well, it's actually a very interesting combination of technologies, but simply this is all being enabled through generative AI. And what we're taking is information about the content, the music and the tracks, editorial expertise, cultural expertise, and combining it all into a large language model to generate content for each user, describing those tracks coming up. And then we render that text into audio using our own in-house technology, which is based off of an acquisition. We acquired a company called Sonantic, which generates audio, spoken words, and sounds like a human who was training the system. And so we have in our voice of X or voice of Livy a lot of real audio from those real people, and now we can generate audio at scale for hundreds of millions of users. And what's super interesting about having this in-house is we've optimized it for cost, so it's hundreds of times cheaper than going to kind of an external vendor. So you can offer this at scale to hundreds of millions of users in the world. Another thing you can do beyond audio explanation of what's coming up next and why you should care is also just on-screen explanations or explanations. And so one of the things we've been starting to do is modify the text explanation you see on the screen when a new album or track or podcast is represented and shown to you. So once you see it, we actually say, how can I better explain this piece of content to this user instead of just generically writing the content description. Oh, this is an album by U2 called Zoo TV. It was an EP and it was released in 1993. So if you replace what I just said there with what the LLM says is going to be more enticing, and so then it might say something like, relive the amazing concert during the Zuropa tour with U2 when they were live in Dublin, and you know this concert was streamed by hundreds of millions of people. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I care about U2 concerts. I care about the history of this kind of Dublin moment. That's more likely to get clicked on, and we see a 4x click-through rate increase if you modify the explanation of why that thing's showing up on your screen. So that's what we call AI merch, and it's been working well, and it's in the early stages. And then another one is we make sure the AI merch is improving itself. And so we have the LLMs generate something for the user, and sometimes they don't say something that interesting, and the click-through rate goes down, and sometimes the click-through rate goes up. And so then we use that to train the LLM and say, here's what you should have said. This worked better than that. And so the LLM is learning from the actual things it tried, what did lead to that click? And for example, instead of saying, delve into the soulful jazz of Ray Charles, you should say, feel the soulful jazz of Ray Charles. Feel the soulful jazz. Because no one wants to delve into anything. People want to, enjoy the content. And so you got to change the way you speak and present the content to keep it enticing. And so we're optimizing the LLMs to get more exciting and enticing so the users really care about the experience more. And then I talked about LLMs as a way of going from words to words, but it turns out also increasingly with the evolution of agentic AI, words and actions can go into an LLM, and then it can generate words output and actions output. It can actually take actions for you. And so increasingly now, we're seeing chatbots become like mini engineers that can create little bits of code for you and execute that code in a company's set of services. And so we actually had a system launched a year ago called AI Playlists, which is one of these agentic systems. And this has been deployed to hundreds of millions of users as of a year ago today. You can find it by going to your library and clicking plus and choosing an AI playlist. But what this is a conversation with Spotify, back and forth. You talk about what you want. You say, I'm in the mood for something romantic for Valentine's Day with a little bit of jazz and not too many lyrics, more instrumental. And Spotify will come back and give you a bunch of tracks. And then you can say, well, actually, that's not enough, let's say, more romantic, please, it'll modify it. So you're having a conversation, and while you have that conversation, code is being executed in the background to generate that playlist that is now a playable object on Spotify. And this is actually not just a chatbot, it's agentic, and it's been working at scale. What's really amazing is we also can learn from this and see what types of conversations and actions lead to more streaming. When did we create a good playlist that actually resonated versus when did we not create a good playlist? And so we're also optimizing and learning how to build better agentic AI playlists. And so some of the key learnings, though, is we know LLMs and AI are great at world knowledge, but one thing that we've found lots of value in is combining that world knowledge with internal data. What is each one of our users caring about? That listening history, combined with that world knowledge, combined with editorial expertise about the content, and AI understanding of that content, really then lets us make great recommendations and connections between consumers and creators. And so we're always optimizing our LLMs to incorporate editorial expertise and internal data beyond what's already out there in world knowledge, which you can get off the shelf from a lot of AI systems generically. And at the end, why is AI working? We really think the magic of AI is when you build AI not just for AI's sake, but to really solve a real job for listeners and creators, really add value. And what's the value? Well, we want to create more connections between consumers and creators. And so whenever we build an AI system, what are we trying to measure? What is our yardstick for success? It's not how much did you interact with the AI, how much did you listen to AI DJ. It's actually how much more listening did you do of real human content. So we don't want users listening 8 hours to the DJ. We want the DJ to increase the total listening of real music, real podcasts, real audiobooks. And so that's how we're driving that real value add for both creators and consumers. The consumers want to discover more, the creators want to be discovered, and we're building those connections more with AI. And at the end, it also feels magical. That's another key way to add value, which is here's a new way to discover. You talk to a chatbot, and it creates the playlist. You listen to a DJ, which explains things, or you read your screen, and it looks different than somebody else's screen because here's an explanation for why every one of those pieces of content matters to you. And so that's really the kind of the real human problem we're solving with AI at scale. And great, I think that's my time. Thank you so much.